All right. So we're talking about, do we play with a bigger opening here or a smaller opening? And I think from everything that I've gathered, it comes down to how you form the embouchure ahead of time, at least as much as what's going on in here while we're playing. I think if you're thinking about while you're playing, am I playing with a larger aperture or smaller aperture, or is it tighter, or is it looser, or is it puckered? I think if you're trying to think about that while you're playing, I think you're going to get lost in the weeds. At that point, I think the trick is to form the embouchure properly as you're putting the mouthpiece to your lips, and then learning, to just use the mechanics of blowing and just forget about, if you can get to the point where you're forgetting about what's going here, and you can just, if it feels right, if it feels good and it sounds good, then you're going to be okay. So what I have here, this is supposed to be your mouthpiece as you're looking at it, okay? Just like this, if you're looking at your mouthpiece, all right? So I just drew it so it's bigger. And so what I have come to believe is that you want to have, and none of this is my idea. This is not my idea. This is not my teaching. This is what I picked up. This is what I've picked up that seems to work better for me. So what you're looking to do is your lips actually should be touching. You're trying to form the mouth, you're trying to form your embouchure before you put the mouthpiece up there. You're kind of starting to help, form it. And then we'll get to that, but that should all be set before you put the mouthpiece up there. I see too many people, they put the mouthpiece up there and then they're trying to screw the mouthpiece onto their lip and do all this finagling. So, a couple important things. You want this, if there was a line right there between your upper and lower lip, you want that line to be perfectly across the center of the mouthpiece. And I might have to redraw that a little bit. And if you're, hopefully your mouthpiece is cut straight, and so that, all right, your mouthpiece is cut straight, and your upper lip is up here, right, and your lower lip is down here, upper, lower, and this line goes right across the center of the mouthpiece, all right? Right across the center of the mouthpiece, and then it also gets you to go right across the center of the hole, all right? Your throat of the mouthpiece, I guess, as it were. All right. So, okay, great. So how do we, and then the question then becomes, well, then how do we regulate? How do we make sure we've got the right tension between this edge and this edge on our lip? And I think it's, in one way, it's more complicated, but it's easier than what we think about. I know it's easier than the way maybe I was taught, or I understood what my teachers were asking from me when I was a youngster. But as I said, the idea is you want the idea of the tension in here, okay, across this part of the mouthpiece. The tension of your upper and lower lip has got to be set up before you put the mouthpiece up there. And then once you find where that's comfortable and it feels good and it sounds good, then you can just forget about it. And then you can just worry about using your air and maybe a little bit of your tongue, all right? Okay, to regulate, use your air to regulate the volume and your tongue to regulate the articulation and the register that you're playing in, you know. And there's a million people tell you all about, oh yeah, raise your tongue, lower your tongue. There's a lot to that, but that may be outside of this discussion. I think we're just trying to look at how do we form our embouchure? How do we get it so that all of this is dead center, upper lip, lower lip, and the middle, left to right, that the hole where the air is coming out is lined up directly with the throat of your mouthpiece. And then it's got to, you know, then that means that the dividing line between your upper and lower lip has got to be perfectly in the dead center, right across the middle of the mouthpiece, dead center, which then should put it dead center across the throat. All right. All right. So let's stop there for a second. And I'm going to amaze you with some more of my outstanding artwork. All right. So bear with me. All right, so what I think about and what I've picked up from different people, and is just simply this idea that, and again, bear with my artwork. All right. Believe it or not, this is a representation of your teeth. Maybe your lower teeth. And then up here, you got a representation, yeah, it's probably too far up. A representation of your upper teeth, okay? And believe me, anything that I'm drawing here is going to be a lot straighter than what I've got in my mouth. My teeth are all up and down and back and forth, and first guy that looked at me when I told him I wanted to play trumpet as a little kid, he said, you're never going to play trumpet with those teeth. It's never going to happen. You got to pick another instrument. Maybe drums, you know. But he said, no, your teeth are not made for playing a brass instrument, and they're probably not even made for playing a woodwind instrument. But fortunately for me, Herb Albert and Doc Severinsen didn't play the drums, and I wanted to play the trumpet like those guys. So been struggling at it for over 50 years. So here we are. Okay. Your teeth are part of this, and that's something that was, at least I never picked up on it as a youngster in my lessons. It was always just the lip and the mouthpiece, all right? But the idea is when you're going to form your embouchure, right, and you've got your lower lip here. Oh gosh, and forgive my drawing. Okay. Yeah, maybe. Oh, that's so awful. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so here we go. Here we are. All right, so here's our lower lip. I'm going to emphasize this first because this is where I start nowadays forming my embouchure. And what I do is I go to put the mouthpiece to my lips, all right? I take, and again, this is not my idea. I did not come up with this. I've just picked this up from a number of guys, all right, that are, what the heck is that? that are a lot better players than me and a lot better teachers than me. And I'm going to refer you to some of them here on. But I mean, I've heard Doc kind of talk about this. I've heard Lynn Nicholson kind of talk about this. And I've certainly heard Charlie Porter do a masterful job of teaching how to get your embouchure together. And it all starts before your mouthpiece goes up to your lip. And the first thing with most of us, this lower lip, you have your teeth behind it, and you see that wonderful dentition back there. up and down, left and right. All right. It just looks like a set of stairs back there, if not, something even more confusing. But this lower lip is kind of tilted out, okay? More than your upper lip normally, okay? Most guys, not everybody. But to one extent or another, this lower lip down here is tilted away from those lower teeth. And what you want to do is you want to get that lower lip and those lower teeth to work together to help to set up and regulate that tension that we're trying to find across the mouthpiece, like I was talking about. Okay, and so the first thing that some of those guys suggested was before you put the mouthpiece up there, you roll that lower lip in just a little bit, just so that the top of your lower lip rests just a little bit against the lower teeth. And that's what I always missed as a youngster. I don't know. I would always just throw it out there and try to wiggle things into place. But you got to build it from the bottom. Okay, you've got to build it from the bottom. What is that, ketchup? I don't know what that is. It's probably ketchup. Anyway, all right. So, but you want to build it before the mouthpiece even hits your lip. So you're going to try to roll your lower lip in a little bit so that the inside of your lip, like the top of your lip, is just about even. You're not like, you're not cranking it in, but just a little bit, okay? So that as much as you can, get the top of your lower lip even or slightly below the lower teeth, okay? So with me, I just have to go, well, I'll just have to try and get them all covered. All right. And then the rest of it is pretty simple. So you roll it in a little bit, and then you just say the letter M, as in mother. M. And you and what that does is it gives you the two elements of a good embouchure that somehow I only got half of as a youngster. And I probably just wasn't listening. All right. So when you roll it in, lower lip, roll it in, say M. And then, rolling the lower lip in, and when you say M, it flattens your chin. Which everybody says, and it does seem to be true. You watch some really, really great players. I can give you some really, really great examples of some people who play with a perfectly flat and still chin, and they're sickening because I can't do it. I just can't do it. But that's the way it's supposed to be. You want that M, flatten your chin, and then a little bit of tension on the corners, okay? So flat chin and firm corners, not tight corners, firm corners. And what that does is that sets your tension across both of your lips for you to put the mouthpiece on it. It's almost like setting up a clarinet reed and a ligature. Okay, it's a lot more similar to that than we think. Okay, because that's all set up. That's there's nothing they really do to that reed after it's on there and they put it in their mouth and start playing. Think about that. It's all set up. You can't really change that. It's got to be set up right. You got to get the right tension on the ligature ahead of time before you start putting it in your mouth. Well, it's the same with the trumpet mouthpiece. You got to roll that in, say the letter M, and at the same time tighten the corners. You really don't have to tighten your chin because by drawing your upper lip in, it's going to flatten that for you. Okay, and then it just becomes a question of placement of the mouthpiece, and this is where mouthpiece size comes in so critical, in the shape of the bowl, because everybody's lips and teeth and everything are a little different. But by keeping the lip rolled in, corners a little tight, thinking M, okay, you're just going to put that. You're going to start by putting the lower rim of the mouthpiece right about where the red hits the white on me. All right. I realize not everybody's lips are red. Not everybody's skin is pink or white, but that's where you're aiming. You want to get the inside where that red is on the mouthpiece there. Okay. That inside rim right on that spot where the red lip and the skin meet, maybe just a hair below that. So you kind of sit it there on that spot. You know, you can figure out where it is. And then what you're going to do, you're going to just tilt the mouthpiece up, right? And again, keeping all, you know, a little bit of tension on the lower lip, firm corners. Roll it out. And Charlie Porter says, as you roll it up and you're blowing, like trying to be dead center as much as possible, left and right, right under your nose. And then, as we said before, up and down, that mouthpiece is going to sit. Again, the inner rim of that mouthpiece, you're going to have it kind of just sit like that. That's where that is going to be just a little bit on the skin, but definitely not on the red down there. Okay? At the lowest point, you don't want it on the red. You want it on the skin. And then what Charlie says is, you know, just blow, and forgive me, Charlie Porter, forgive me. You put it on there, and then you just start pivoting the mouthpiece up. Probably show you a little bit better this way, right? Can you see it? Yeah. As you start to blow, keeping everything nice and firm, and wherever, once that mouthpiece kind of starts to form a seal, right? And you kind of work with the position of the upper lip to get that air to go through there nice and fast. You're not blowing that hard. You're not really blowing that hard. There will be a spot where you'll get a nice buzz as you pivot that mouthpiece up. And that's because you've already established the tension of the lower lip and the upper lip by flattening the chin and firming up the corners. That's going to give you your lip tension. And then at that point, we're really not interested in measuring how big that hole is. One would assume that it's going to be very, very similar, you know, where the air comes out. Where the air comes out is going to be, if you could measure that aperture somehow, it's going to be roughly the size of the throat of your mouthpiece, all right? More or less, okay? So I hope that helps. You know, I've gotten that question before. Is like, you know, do you play with your lips apart or your lips closer? I really don't try to think about that so much. I just try to think about getting a nice sound. And then really, to a certain extent, I think, okay, this is what Steve thinks, is just the pressure that keeps your mouthpiece up against your teeth once you've set the teeth there, your upper and lower lip. And I'm not talking about, you know, getting a whole lot of pressure and wrenching. You know, you don't have to have muscle builder muscles here. It's just very little. Roll it in, firm up the corners, say the letter M very gently. Oh, maybe a little off there. Better. Yeah, you're going to find that spot. And when you know, that was a lot better buzz. That's the buzz you're looking for on the mouthpiece. And that's why it's important to kind of practice buzzing and practice with just a mouthpiece and, practice on the horn with the, I can't find my little mouthpiece buzzer adapter. It's here somewhere. But that's why I could never understand as a youngster, why is it important to buzz? Why do we got to buzz? Who cares about buzzing? I want to hear the trumpet. I want to work on my trumpet sound. I don't care about my buzz sound. The thing is, you're looking for where it feels good, and they say just right there. That's where the lower rim goes, outside the red. Say the letter M. Lower lip in a little, corners firm. And eventually you'll find that sweet spot with the right tension that you've established just by simply forming the embouchure, with a little bit of lower lip tension, flattening the chin, firming up the corners. The tension inside the cup will be there, and you're actually kind of almost letting the mouthpiece do the work of holding that tension there, almost like your ligature on a woodwind instrument. Like a clarinet would hold that reed at a certain point at a certain tension. It's the same thing with the mouthpiece. You're not trying to, work it and find it inside the mouthpiece. You're just kind of trying to set it up and then just get your air going properly. A nice, easy breath. You don't have to honk. All right. And that's the feeling, and that's sort of the general. That's the good sound that I get. I've heard a lot of you guys buzz, and you get these amazing buzzes. They sound better than my than what it does when I play the trumpet. Your buzzes are so beautiful. There's a lot of guys out there that can do that. I'm not one of them, but that's what I'm getting at when you ask me, do I play with a more open or more closed? It's just a matter of kind of setting them up, getting this lower lip at the same level as your lower teeth, right? Saying the letter M, rolling that up. And you can see, a little bit of tension there. There's just enough though. And I've been since I've come back over the last 2 years or so, that was one of the things I really wanted to explore, is like, I know I'm not forming my embouchure right, and it has helped me with a couple things in my playing, which I always kind of struggled with, and I still struggle with, but number one is my sound. I think my sound is a lot better now, okay, than it ever was before, even when I was playing with the Air Force Band, okay? I think my sound is better now. And that could be due to a lot of reasons, but I think now I'm being more mindful of properly forming my embouchure, which, as I say, consists of starting to get it set up before you put the mouthpiece up there, before you put the trumpet up there. It's got to be, it's got to be in the right spot. Things have got to be set. I see a lot of people just okay, throw it up there, and where does it go? And, then the reason that I like this method is it's a feeling. Your body can remember the feeling of getting that, where that mouthpiece has to hit. If you're just kind of throwing it up there, then you got to screw around with both lips and up and down and left and right in your teeth. You might end up in the right spot. You might end up in the wrong spot. And so for those of us especially that don't have perfect teeth, look at this mess down there. In and out, up and down. But, there is a spot. There's a spot. The upper teeth aren't bad. I got one really big one sticking out here. Kind of play off that high tooth, always have. So, that's how I set it up now. And I'm just, if it feels right and the buzz sounds good and it just feels effortless. And I think that's the one thing, too, it kind of plays into where we're seeing a lot of teaching nowadays, where in the old days, back when I was a youngster, back in the old days, those of us that were taught and came up, back in the 70s and it was all air, power, power, power. Everybody's like, okay, you got to, tons of air, tons of Bud Herseth, tons of Louis Davidson, you know, tons of all those kind of guys, with that orchestral sound, which is a great sound, but it's a lot. It can be a lot of work, to just think of it. But now, because of some improvements, I think in the horns, in the equipment, like mouthpieces and stuff like that, you don't have to be so aggressive with the air, and you don't have to fight the horn so much. Relax a little bit, take it easier on your face, and get the mechanics more correctly, get your equipment set up more correctly, and especially get a mouthpiece that works for you, get a mouthpiece that really works for you. And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. I mean, you hear so much stuff out there about mouthpieces. There's so much going on with mouthpieces nowadays. They're working on them and designing them like they're designing, rocket nozzles for NASA, and that's what it really comes down to. It's not that far off. I mean, when you're talking about some of the things that they're dealing with in, designing rockets and how rockets have to function and the flow of gas and liquid through rocket parts, well, it all comes down to the same things we're dealing with as trumpet players: pressure and flow and harmonics. That's all important in rockets, and we're finding out how much more and more important it is to get that straightened out with trumpets, and especially trumpet mouthpieces. And I think we're in a lot better spot that way than we used to be. Everybody would say, "Oh, get a Bach 37 and a 1.5 and blow your brains out," And if it works, it works. If not, you'll give it up and go do something else. But I think I think now, things are a lot better that way. And I think with improved thinking about what we're really doing here and what we're really doing with the equipment, I think we can take it a lot easier on myself. And that brings me to the other thing. I said my sound, I think, is better. Of course, I have less hearing now, a lot less hearing now. So maybe that's why I think my sound is better. But the other thing is, I really find I don't struggle nearly as much with my endurance anymore, and I don't struggle as much with chop maintenance every day. I mean, I don't feel like I have to get up every day and do a 20-minute warm up just to get my poor chops, loosened up and functioning and getting the blood going, because I had to abuse them so bad by blowing my brains out the day before into a 1.5 C, that it really was wrecking my chops. Now I can, it's still important, I think, for me to play every day. I still got to play. If I miss a day, I can kind of feel it. It does take a minute to get things, cranked up again. But when I pick up the horn, I seem like I get going a lot faster than I ever did. And I think it's a lot to do with the equipment. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I'm not ending the previous session having pushed myself clear to the end of what my endurance and what my face can handle, that it's just basically wrecked and I can't play anymore that day anyway. And then I get up the next day and, it's like, what the heck have I done? What am I going to have to do to get my face back to where it even feels like playing, and then it's just like, to me it was always like my endurance, it was really, okay, this is how much endurance I have today, and as soon as I start playing, you're just dumping water out of a cup until it's gone, until you're wrecked. And but nowadays I don't feel that so much. I don't feel that so much. I don't feel that much. I don't feel that way when I'm, playing in rehearsals, and, some of I play one rehearsal goes like 2 hours once a week. And yeah, admittedly, it's just a concert band rehearsal. We're not doing, most of the time, extremely wicked stuff for, the brass section. But, when when it comes up, it doesn't matter if it comes up at the beginning of the rehearsal or the end of the rehearsal. If there's things I need to do in terms of range or volume or, flexibility, or you got a long section that, is kind of, you got to get on your horse and go for a while. Yeah, it's much easier now. And I attribute that to the equipment and kind of an approach where I just have realized, man, I just can't go and destroy my face every day. There's got to be a better way. And I think this idea of forming the embouchure this way, and utilizing some better ideas in terms of mouthpiece size and just general mouthpiece makeup and the horns. I think it's enabling us to not kill ourselves every darn time we got to pick up the horn. So I hope that helps, Jeffrey, and anybody else that may see this. If you have other questions, please post them. Like I say, none of this is my idea at all, because I picked it up over the years and in recent times, with all the new fabulous way we have of sharing information on the internet and YouTube and Instagram and every other dang thing. There's just, so much great information out there, and, it would be to anybody's advantage to get out there and start listening to what some of these people that really know what they're talking about have to say, and stop watching the videos of goofballs like me put out. Thanks.